Hello and welcome to The Game, football podcast from The Times and Sunday Times. The holders knocked out by a team 117 places below them in the pyramid. Stacks of goals, extra time and penalties, and even West Ham won. Who says the FA Cup is boring? Plenty of teams enjoyed their weekend, but it's more misery for Thomas Frank as Tottenham are knocked out by Aston Villa. And at Old Trafford, Manchester United were beaten by Brighton, with Michael Carrick the favourite to lead them until the end of the season. How do they salvage their shortest campaign for 111 years? I'm Tom Clark, and joining me today we have the football reporter who covers clubs in the south of England with a focus on Tottenham. It's Tom Allnut, the reporter and tactical analyst Hamza Khalid-Lunat, and the former footballer turned journalist Gregor Robertson is here as usual. Now team, as we record this on Monday morning, the big news courtesy of Matt Lawton late on Sunday night is that Michael Carrick is the favourite to be Manchester United manager until the end of the season. Maybe by the time you're listening to this he's already been appointed. Maybe the story's changed completely, but we're not going to start with that, because when on earth do you get the chance to start a podcast with some glory from a team in the National League North? Gregor, Macclesfield beating Crystal Palace on Saturday 2-1. I don't think anyone saw this coming. A fully deserved victory. They were excellent, weren't they?
Yeah, great scenes as well. Pitch invasion, players held up on shoulders, all that kind of stuff. Player with a bandage on his head scoring the goal and celebrating on the fans' shoulders. Brilliant. Crystal Palace were really poor, but Macclesfield made it really difficult. They did everything that you should do in an FA Cup tie like this. They made it really difficult for them. They were physical, that kind of, it's been mentioned before, but that moment right from kickoff where the ball was played into the corner and Dawson just ran sort of to win the header, but actually headed the defender. Like, it was, welcome.
Yeah,
This is going to be physical.
Here we go, boys.
And that's what to do. That is the way to do it. It's a leveler. The pitch is a leveler too.
I thought the pitch was interesting. Some of the Palace players looking at it, going, what the hell is this? Looked like they were going to fall over all the time. Yeah,
like I played at Moss Rose when they were in the Football League, and it used to be either like a dusty, pothole-ridden thing in the summer, a bog in the winter, and that was a leveler. But this is a different type of leveler when it's a plastic pitch, and it definitely was. It doesn't move the same. The ball doesn't move the same way.
Remember Spurs last season against Tamworth? It was the same, wasn't it? They struggled in that.
Yeah, big time.
Because actually, I think people often think plastic pitches, the ball moves quicker, but sometimes it moves slow. Sometimes when you have a lot of that sort of rubber stuff that gets all over your living room.
After you've played six-a-side.
My missus was like, there's rubber stuff all over the house again, looking to hoover it out. It gets near Hoover as well. Anyway, but it slows up the pitch, right? It makes it really thick if you have too much of it. And actually, when you pass a ball across a pitch, it sometimes just holds up, doesn't it? And I think the Prem teams sometimes find it really difficult, that.
Yeah. Hamza, you were enjoying John Rooney, the manager of Macclesfield's comments after the game about some of his tactics for the players at half-time in this one.
Yeah, he was on 5 Live. So I just got to Fulham because I was at Craven Cottage for that match at 3 o'clock, and I was listening in, and in his interview, it was a really good interview actually, but one part of it stuck out to me. He said at half time, he said, tie your laces, like do everything, walk to free kicks, slow the game down. And if you look at the ball in playtime, it was much lower, but as in, what do you expect? This is what you meant to do, and I think they managed the game really well in that respect. And I never feel bad if it's a team punching up, doing that sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's when you've got a team that's punching down, right? Should Real Madrid be time wasting? No, of course not. Macclesfield, yeah, of course. I thought they managed that really well.
Absolutely, I'm delighted that they passed the Hamza Khalid-Lunat time waste test as well. Gregor, for the FA Cup generally, though, we're going to talk about lots of games, but this Macclesfield win, loads of goals across the weekend actually, but particularly on Sunday. Newcastle-Bournemouth was a thriller. You got Robin Roos heroics for Sunderland. Wrexham beating Nottingham Forest on Friday night. I mean, this was a good third round for the kind of standing of the FA Cup in modern football, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I watched the Wrexham game on Friday, and that was a great game to watch. Like, great spectacle, great. Hudson-Odoi scored some great goals to get them back into the game, and then Wrexham just at home, impossible place to go. So hard at the moment, and there's a great spirit and energy there. A lot of cynicism about Wrexham, but it's a great place to watch football, and there's been some big cup shocks there recently as well. So that was fantastic. I really enjoyed Mansfield's performance at Sheffield United.
Great goals in that game.
Louis Reed's goals, the volleys, and against his former club. Actually, Hamer's goal as well.
Fantastic.
Took the biscuit. That was a great game, as you say. I was at West Ham. You think, this could be the most depressing game in the entire third round this weekend. And the first half was, but it came to life and they won. And there was a bit of energy in the stadium at the end. So that was a big game, a big moment for West Ham as well. And then you see some moments that are some decisions or incidents that are like touch and go, and there's no VAR, and like there was no controversy, and everyone just goes, you know what, this is great.
Yeah, no
So,
VAR.
yeah,
Let's
it was
get
a
on
good
with
weekend.
it. Just coming back to Macclesfield quickly and that Palace performance as well. They were dreadful, Crystal Palace, weren't they, as well? Not taking anything away from Macclesfield. The gap is huge between the two sides. Macclesfield, fantastic, proper fairy tale stuff. But Palace were dreadful in this game, weren't they, Tom? And I mean, slightly worrying for Oliver Glasner that he's had this kind of game. He had the Conference League game where he made changes as well, and they didn't quite deliver for him. It's a bit of an uncomfortable blip, isn't it, for Palace at the moment?
Definitely, yeah, more than an uncomfortable blip. So it's a humiliation, isn't it? And I think, the way Glasner was, I mean, Tony wrote a good piece, I thought, today
Tony
about...
Cascarino's written on the Times website saying he kind of thinks Glasner's seeming a bit arrogant of late.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if arrogant is the word I'd use, but I don't think this future, the uncertainty around him is helping. And maybe it's no coincidence that Bournemouth have also been on a really similarly bad run. There aren't many clubs that can kind of perform well when their manager, particularly when the manager is the main guy at the club, you don't know if he's going to be here in 6 months.
Yeah.
That's only something that can last, I think, for so long until you need some clarity. I mean, Glasner changed, didn't he, at half time and went to a back four, and that didn't really work, didn't make it better. I mean, they've obviously got injuries at the moment, Palace. They are struggling, and we know their squad is really thin. We know Glasner has been, given a difficult hand in that regard. But they're not on a good run, and I do worry a little bit about the second half of the season, and we were kind of saying, weren't we, early on, maybe Palace could sort of challenge for the European places and maybe Champions League and, what a team this is, but it's just slightly sort of starting to unravel, isn't it, with the options they have, and I think the uncertainty around Glasner and just his body language, I think, doesn't look particularly right at the moment.
Yeah.
I sort of worry about what the second half of the season is going to bring for them.
Is he in danger of damaging his reputation? Because we're going to come on to talk about Manchester United and lots of other big clubs. He's one of the managers, as you referenced there with Iraola as well, who we always link with some of the bigger jobs at bigger clubs with respect to Palace and Bournemouth. If he has a terrible 6 months, or if they have a terrible 6 months, does that tarnish his reputation after all the brilliant work he did last season?
I mean, it shouldn't, but it will, because whenever big clubs are sort of looking for managers, you'd like to think they have these like long spreadsheets and big ideas, and they look at all that. But actually, a lot of it is about momentum, isn't it? And when Glasner just won the FA Cup, his stock was right up here. Yeah. If they have a difficult second half of the season, he's not going to be anywhere near as fashionable. I mean, I think always with Glasner there have been doubts about the style of play. Like I think as a character and a personality, he's very compelling. He comes across really well. I think he has that kind of self-belief. Tony calls it arrogance. I think in a way you can say he's got charisma, which for a big club is what you need. I do think, you go back even before Palace and look at how they played at Eintracht, for example, where even that season, I remember when they won the Europa League, there was this sort of idea with Glasner. I remember him saying, I read it somewhere where he said, why are we losing all these games in the league? Because they've really tailed off in the Bundesliga. Yeah. And why are we doing so well in Europe? And he said, well, it's because in Bundesliga, we're playing against all these weaker opponents. We have the ball all the time. In the Europa League, we don't have the ball at all. And we let them have it. And that's how we should play now. Let's let everyone else have the ball. And there is a bit of that, with Palace as well, right? Where he almost prefers the other team to have the ball. We're very good at counter-attacking, very vertical. He talks about, in the final third, I don't really like possession. I want us to go fast and go quick. And I think that's all fine if you're the Palace manager, but I wonder if at a bigger club, we've seen with Frank at Spurs, for example, whether you can get away with that, really.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about Thomas Frank in the second half of the show. Hamza, Gregor, thoughts on Oliver Glasner and some of the points that both Tom and Tony's made on the website as well?
I think the one thing is you see how he's been quite punchy, like in terms of the way he's criticised the club and the way that they approached the transfer window in the summer. And I think actually in the context of some of the discussions we've been having recently, that actually might be more of an alarm bell than anything else. Like,
as in for these big clubs that have sacked Ruben Amorim, Enzo Maresca and people for not towing the line. Yeah.
He says what he thinks. He came in and he seemed quite kind of mild-mannered and gentlemanly, but he's not been recently. He's I've covered a couple of games where he's been very, very critical. And he's probably, and in one sense, he's been right to be. He said we achieved something historic last season, won the FA Cup, qualified for Europe. That was the time to invest, and we chose not to, and we saved. And actually, fundamentally, despite everything we're saying here, that is the biggest reason why Palace are where they are. They can't cope with the schedule and the number of games that European football foists upon them. And they've got Nketiah out, Munoz out, Kamada out, Doucouré. There's been a few others throughout the season. Their squad can't cope with that. So that's the main reason, and I think he's kind of getting frustrated by it because he'd made such huge strides and advances. To take a backward step in that kind of circumstances is frustrating for him.
I think, excuse me, managers that will have a pop at the board. I think, well, I was speaking to a board member the other day from one of the clubs that sat their managers recently, and they said they were absolutely sure that their process was completely right, compartmentalising the role of the manager and empowering other people around the manager, such as medical staff, sporting director, all that sort of stuff. The issue is, and that idea comes from the US, where you have NFL or NBA teams where you've got managing a guy, a GM that will manage the whole team, and then you have like an offensive coach, all this sort of stuff. And that all makes sense. The issue is that, first of all, there's an idea of what a manager is, and this is what coaches have historically grown up with. They see their role as an executive role, where, in the same way as like in a presidential system, where they make the decision. They're not like a prime ministerial one where they're first on equals. They assess all the information and they go, okay, X player is a risk today, but I'm the manager. I'm going to decide to play them because I think we need to win. And the reason they think that is because they are always principally the person under pressure. And this is a dynamic that's key. No manager is ever going to cede power away and willingly take all the criticism for it when it's only their head on the chopping block. So, for example, let's say, take Maresca. He was a bit upset about not being able to, in his view, being able to pick who he wanted to. If he can't pick who he wants to and performances suffer, then he's under pressure. And then you get to that weird situation where he goes, I'm not happy. And everyone goes, why are you not happy? And essentially it's because he couldn't choose who he wanted to. And this dynamic isn't going to change unless managers feel that they are supported enough by the club that if, for example, someone like Enzo Maresca says, okay, I'm not going to play Reece James for 2 weeks or Cole Palmer for 2 weeks, the performances are probably going to suffer. But if he feels that the club's going to say, okay, sure, we don't mind, that's okay, and the media and the fans' perspective won't turn, then they can do that. But until that point, managers are never going to do that because they realise it's only them that they don't feel that, for example, if a player is handled poorly, that the head of performance is going to face real pressure, or the sporting director, if they make a few errors, that they're going to be under pressure. It's always them. And because of that, you've got this weird dynamic. And I think boards and clubs that are trying to bring in this sort of management style need to realise that they have to manage the coaches. And take Brighton. Brighton have this structure. And when De Zerbi was there, often De Zerbi would say, this club has no ambition, or something to that words to that effect. We didn't get who we wanted to. And the club were quite clear in sort of managing him and going, he says his stuff, but we can deal with it. Sacking the manager or immediately after something like that, it is not going to entice the best managers over. And over time anyway, a manager, as their prestige grows and their belief in themselves grows, that they want to be more of an executive, and that speeds up the process. Look at Arteta.
The managers might feel that, but I mean, I agree with what Hamza's saying, but I also think that more and more we're seeing fans kind of cottoning on, and actually a lot of the opposition you see this season, for example, is look at Chelsea. The dissent from the stands is not towards Maresca particularly, or even Rosinho. It's towards Bowley and Bluecoat, right? And same at Manchester United. The dissent right now is towards the ownership. I think more and more, as fans are realising that the managers and they're actually head coaches, have less authority, they're taking it out on the ownership. It's the same at West Ham, of course. It's Sullivan who's getting the hits at the moment.
Everything Hamza says is absolutely fine if they know what they're doing. But there's been very little evidence these two clubs in particular that we're talking about. I've been successful in what they're doing. You could spend £1 billion and sign some of the best, like all the best players, young players in Europe. That in itself isn't a strategy. And also, it's not your strategy if your goal is to win titles. So that's where the conflict is. I don't know how we got into Chelsea there, but
we've perfectly slalomed into Hamza's mentioned Brighton and Manchester United. He was teaming up perfectly for us to move on to the second part of this first half of the show.
Johnny wrote a really good piece in the Sunday Times about this topic.
The future of the manager.
Just about how basically will managers ever be the same? And I guess the one counterpoint which Johnny does point out in the piece is that you look at the three teams right now in the Premier League who are doing well. Aston Villa, Unai Emery, City, Guardiola, and Arsenal, Arteta. They are the three clubs who have managers who basically run the show.
As Hamza said, the kind of presidential type role.
But are they allowed to run the show because they've done a good job? Rather than it's doing well because they're allowed to run the show.
Earn your stripes and you can run the show type thing.
And is that desirable?
Emery's a unique one. Emery's a unique one because he was brought in and shaped everything around him.
from the beginning. You know, whereas Arteta, for example, was initially, had a lot of execs around him and gradually has basically taken over.
Yeah, really interesting. Well, as I say, we've teed it up by talking about managerial power struggles and a mention of Brighton as well. So let's move on and talk about that. But a final congratulations to Macclesfield. Let's hope you get a plum tie in the draw, which takes place tonight. Make sure you avoid Burton Albion or Grimsby away. Mac fans, fingers crossed.
I enjoyed the Macclesfield players singing the change room, Adele, Someone Like You, which I just... Not really the kind of song I think in like a change room when you got lads, everyone like arms around each other's shoulders.
It's a new generation of players, Tom.
Can't beat a bit of Adele. Greg, have you ever sing Adele in the dressing room?
Absolutely not, Tom.
No. Next question. Anyway, as I said, I've teed it up several times now. Let's talk about the situation at Manchester United, beaten in the FA Cup by a brilliant performance from Brighton. But as I mentioned at the very top of the show, the latest news on the Times website as we record on Monday morning is that Michael Carrick has emerged as the favourite to become Manchester United's interim head coach until the end of the season. The club are due to make an appointment within the next 48 hours. So as I've already said, by the time you're listening to this decision could be announced. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who previously managed United for 3 years, has also been very much in the club's thoughts, and further talks with both Carrick and the Norwegian took place over the weekend, Matt Lawton writes. But the Times understands that Carrick, who spent 12 years at Old Trafford as a player and did have a brief spell as caretaker manager in 2021, impressed in the discussions. He's been out of work since June 2025 after being sacked by Middlesbrough. Where should we start? Michael Carrick, we did briefly discuss this, Gregor, on the last show. Shows that maybe Jim Ratcliffe and the Ineos team do listen to the Game podcast, because on Thursday's show you were all Carrick over Solskjaer. So clearly they've listened to us.
I'd like to think so. You never know with these guys. My starting point with that is that Carrick has a future. Solskjaer doesn't. Like, that just feels like it's a massive step back into the past. I know they all are. All the options on the table are that, and essentially. But Carrick has a bright future, and it could become something more potentially. I know that would be still unlikely, but he did well at Middlesbrough, and I just feel that he's promising. He's a promising coach. Solskjaer is like, there's no other circumstance in the world that he would be Manchester United manager. There wasn't the first time. It's just ridiculous. So yeah, out of all the options, Carrick was.
But what's the aim? That's what I wonder. Like, is the aim to appoint someone where you're saying, let's give him a chance and maybe he gets the job in the summer?
No.
Or is the idea, let's give someone 6 months with the best chance of us having a bit of an uplift and getting to the top 5? Because I think, actually,
the second one.
I think that Solskjaer maybe is the better bet for the second one, because he comes in
just vibes based.
Vibes based.
We're back to vibes based.
The fans are on it. What he did last time, let them play attacking football.
I don't think the team's good enough for vibes to be enough of a boost for them.
That's the thing, because Solskjaer did do vibes last time, but he had like a really good squad actually. When you go back and look at it, like they real like global superstars in that team.
Yeah, you need a good coach. And Carrick carries himself well. He's got a bit of presence. He's got the connection as well. And actually, probably more of the players know Carrick than Solskjaer. We spoke about this before.
Yeah.
Martin Samuel was talking about this. Like, how much does really the people of this generation know much about Solskjaer? They've seen his goal in the Champions League final, but not much else. So that can be talked up too much. Maybe I think Carrick's a good coach, and he was on Solskjaer's coaching staff. He wasn't going to come in together. That was obviously discounted quite early on. So for me, I think go with the coach.
Yeah, a long period of time as well as Middlesbrough coach. I was speaking to Joe Harston, who's one of our young reporters who is a Middlesbrough fan, and was saying that kind of his time at Middlesbrough, he worked well with young players. It was kind of credited with kind of starting the careers of players like Hayden Hackney and others. Played quite progressive football in terms of wanting to attack and play out from the back. Scored a lot of goals in his first season. It was, very highly thought of, and it just kind of tailed off when they sold a lot of their best players, Middlesbrough, some of their forwards as well. So perhaps it is then a more positive thing for Manchester United to go down this route. But as I say, we'll keep you up to date with the latest on the Times website if you've not already found out by the time you're listening to this show. Let's talk about the match in itself. Whoever gets the job, whether it's Michael Carrick, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or Darren Fletcher, they've got a hell of a task on their hands, haven't they? When you watch this Brighton game back, they were dreadful. Anyone disagree with me on that? Any bright sparks other than that first 5 minutes when Diego Dalot should have scored? This switch to the back four, I thought Manchester United looked really, really poor and completely tactically clueless a lot of the time.
Yeah. As in, so there's a lot of clamour for the back four, but as we've discussed before, and as you've just touched on, right, more than the manager, the really important thing is the quality of the players available, and specifically the midfielders, and they still haven't got that. So you could change system and some things might improve. You can change manager and some things might improve, but fundamentally the best way to improve your performances on the pitch is to get the best players on the pitch. So I think that more than anything, more important than a manager, honestly, is getting a really, really good centre midfielder, maybe one or two, maybe two, but getting in a top midfielder would help solve a lot of their issues in terms of the way that they're played through, the way that they can control games, the way that they can impose themselves on opposition teams, and then support the players around them, because you've got lots of good players ahead of the midfield who aren't just getting on the ball enough. So resolve that, and I think that will be a big step in the right direction, irrespective of the manager.
On that subject of midfield, obviously a lot of clamour amongst United fans for Kobbie Mainoo to play. He started this game, tried quite hard, but again didn't look, obviously not match fit as well.
He hasn't played a lot.
In terms of a midfield placing, is he better in a 3? Do they have to play a 3-man midfield for Kobbie Mainoo to thrive?
As in, Kobbie in a 2 is a lot to ask of a player that isn't able to cover space as well as you'd like for a player in a double pivot. As in, especially with the other partner that he has, if it's Agati or Casemiro, that's not really a dynamic that you want. Or Fernandes, the way that he was used by Amorim was that he would get license to attack. And the interesting thing was that their attacking numbers this season were pretty good. I think last time I checked, they had the third most goals, third most XG, most shots in the league. So that, from a team that was quite bad when Amorim took over, he left them with one that could actually attack. Not great, but as in they went from a genuinely bad team to an alright team, and one that's quite good at scoring goals.
They're missing Ahmad and Brian Bumo, who've been two of their best and most consistent players this season. In terms of this, are there bright spots? We were talking about the show before we started recording. Benjamin Sesko looking a little bit brighter in the last couple of games. Is that due to the tactics, Gregor, playing to a bit more to his strengths, trying to get crosses and balls into the box?
Yeah, we spoke about that before. It's the same in the Burnley game. You just saw sequences of play that you haven't really seen in Amorim's system, of winger getting not to the byline, but getting down the flank and playing across. And he was a sort of first time instinctive finish. And this was a good header. He's really good in the air too. I think getting crosses in the box is a good idea with Sesko in your team. So yeah, he's it's a bit of a bright spark, but they're not many. One
player I wanted to ask a question about was Matheus Cunha, because I think in this game and the last couple of games that I've seen for Manchester United, he looked increasingly lost, in my opinion. I mean, was signed to much fanfare alongside Brian Bumo. They've gone in different directions, in my opinion, in this Manchester United team. Bumo very much looking like a superstar player, one that can take a team like Manchester United forward. I'm looking at Cunha and wondering, maybe he is a bottom half of the Premier League level player who sometimes produces some brilliance, a great free kick or a great goal. What do we think about that idea?
That's a little bit harsh, I think. Harsh? What he is, though, is a player that requires a lot of the ball and a lot of possession, and to use up a lot of possession. We discussed this before, but as in, when you have Bruno in your team, he uses up a lot of the ball. When you've got Mbama who takes shots and Sesko who takes shots, they also use up lots of the ball, which means that there's not much left for other players. And Cunha, as he demonstrated at Wolves, where he took a large proportion of their shots, especially last season, right? He needs the ball to go through him a lot. The difficulty that United have at the moment is trying to get a balance with, when Burma's back, him, Sesko and Cunha and Fernandes in the team. And that, I don't think you can get that, and that's something the club have looked at. And to be honest, I think their plan last summer, was to sign these guys, sell Fernandes for a big fee, and then use that to reinvest into midfield. And then you go, well, actually, the plan sort of made sense. But because Fernandes didn't want to go, which we found out a few weeks ago, that sort of meant that they had to reschedule their plans and then move for a midfielder in the coming summer. So that's why they look a little bit worse. But I think the plan generally was actually okay. I think the way that the scouting team and data team, which is nascent at United but quite good, work is pretty good. I think they should stop listening to people on podcasts at the top level, if they are, right. They should let those guys get to work, and then I'm not sure about the manager.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Anyone worried about Matheus Cunha at Manchester United?
No, so he was really good at Villa when I was at that game just before Christmas. You've seen flashes of him, and I think essentially I don't think he's a bottom half Premier League player, Tom. I think he's a player who can take Manchester United help take Manchester United back in the Champions League places, I don't think he's a player that they'll win the league with.
Do you think he needs to be the main man though in a team?
I don't know. It's easy to say that after he certainly was at Wolves, and also he was bought with the intention of playing alongside Mbeumo as one of the 2 10s, and that kind of, they are the players that a lot of their attacking play would have gone through, and that's out the window now. And so, he's not actually got a natural fit in this team. That's another big another reason for this.
I draw the parallel with Grealish. When Grealish was at Villa, again, another player that would, I say, use up loads of possessions, but essentially is the main man.
Yeah, we know what you mean. You play through, yeah.
Yeah. And then when you put him into a team where other players want the play to go through them, and the manager does as well, then they suffer. So I think he may be one of those players that needs a lot of play to go through him and the game to be centred around him. Whether you want to do that with him when you've got Mbeumo in your team and Sesko, I don't know, but it's a question.
They've got 17 games left, United. I mean, for Arsenal, that's like 2 months.
Yeah.
They're nearly finished.
But as I mentioned, for the first time since 1914-15 season, they're only going to play 40 games in a season.
Which players will be fresh for the World Cup, which is great, I guess.
How many of them are going? That's the question. But I mean, it is remarkable, isn't it?
We're talking about an interim job for Carrick.
Yes, 17 games to get in the Champions League. Basically, that's what it is. I mean, are they good enough to get in the Champions League? Regardless of what I think about Matheus Cunha and this squad, when they get Ahmad back, when they get Brian Mbeumo back, whether it's Michael Carrick or someone else, is this Manchester United squad good enough to get in the Champions League?
They're good enough to get 5th, I think, this season. I don't see them. They're not better than the top 3, clearly, and I don't think they're better than Liverpool. But that 5th spot, I think, is still up for grabs. The way Chelsea are with Rosinha, who knows, big question mark. I think that's up for grabs for anyone who can suddenly put together a decent second half of the season.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I agree. I don't think, I'd be amazed if they got in 4th, definitely not in the top 3. So yeah, I think 5th is up for grabs.
What do we say? Start the season, 7th, 8th best squad.
Yeah,
it's possible that they could get to 5th. Yeah,
they could do it. See,
with Solskjaer, not Carrick.
Manchester United fans, you always do get in touch with me, but please do as well. tom.clark@thetimes.co.uk. Give me your thoughts on whether it's Michael Carrick or someone else, and your thoughts on Matheus Cunha as well. It's time for the favourite catchphrase of any presenter of any kind of football show on TV, radio, or anywhere. Brighton were very good, weren't they? Brighton, and they were very good. Fabian Hertzler quietly doing a very good job. So much fanfare when he came in. No, not doing a good job.
Yes, but it's a funny one. I covered them a few weeks back, and he just hit the half century of games, and he'd won more points than De Zerbi, and that was like, oh wow,
yeah.
And
so quietly doing a very good job.
Yeah,
then you're saying
but the fans aren't. No, that's what I was just going to say. The fans aren't really. They love De Zerbi. They don't love him. Like, I don't know what that dynamic is. I'm not entirely sure why. I think maybe, like, De Zerbi's football was thrilling. Like, Hertzler's is less so. It's really dynamic and stuff, and it's
pretty attacking, though.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Like, I really enjoyed watching.
Yeah, but I think they're also another team that are kind of at their most dangerous when the other team's got the ball. De Zerbi were like did things you go, wow. Like, I know. Not
depends on who you have. Like, you can only be a possession dominant team if you've got really good players. Like, I know your criticism of Glasner earlier. As in, I largely agree with it. Like, the question is, what can you do when you have the ball? But as in, if you haven't got players that are really good with the ball, you have to be really good without it.
It's it's less criticism of Glasner. It's more, can that work? At a big club. I think it's great to watch, and Conte football. When it's good, it's absolutely brilliant to watch. But it's whether that kind of football. Conte's football definitely works for the big clubs, so whether it can work in the big ones, Yeah.
But it's still always, when you watch them, every time there's a player, to me as well, that you go, oh my God, who's this guy? And yesterday it was Brian Gruder, only 21, signed from Mainz in the summer of 2024 for 25 million. Absolutely ran midfield. Hamza, you were talking about Manchester United needing midfielders. I thought he was brilliant in just, ahead of that midfield, but attacking brilliantly. Gregor, our mate Kadioglu at left back, starting to come good.
Really is, yeah. Yeah, he had a bit of a stop-start time with injury, and everyone loved him at the was it Euros? Yeah, with Turkey. Like, he's really coming to his own recently, and like, it's a great threat in attack. And then, but I agree with you. Both the centre halves, Boscagali and Coppola. Like, I'm not entirely sure where they came from. When it's my job.
That genuinely might be their first and only mentions on the podcast this season. But they were brilliant.
Yeah, and then they got Pascal Gross back. That was
he was running midfield at 34.
Yeah, great player. So
I always like Ayari as well, midfield, actually. He didn't start this one. Yeah. Whenever I watch Brighton, I did them 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he's just he's nice.
He's nice. He's nice.
He's nice to watch.
Brighton had a period where they obviously their profits were enormous after Caicedo's sale and one or two others, and I think they took the view that because of profit and sustainability regulations, where like it's a 3-year rolling cycle, we got to spend this money now, and they really spent it. So this is why, like, they invested a lot of money in the last 2 or 3 transfer windows. And this is why and a lot of them are for the future. That's the way it's always been. Like the 2 players they signed, they're like kind of young Greece internationals as well. Like one got injured, but the other one really flickered promise as well. So this is why they keep the player. They might have signed them 2 transfer windows ago, but they put them in. And they go, oh god, yeah, they've got him.
There's another midfielder that often gets skirted around 20 years old, Jack Hinchelwood.
Yeah,
and he's always really good.
Yeah.
I think people don't realise just how young he is, but as in. At the FA, they love him. For the 21s, he was such a valued player. John McDermott spoke really, really highly about him and his character. And I think he's not that far away from the senior team as well. I know a lot of people just think about the more eye-catching players with Brighton. I've been guilty of it. I love watching Minter, for example. But as in, Hinchelwood always puts in a pretty good level, and then in some matches as well, he raises it. And as a 20-year-old,
he's feisty as well, isn't he?
As a
really
20-year-old to do that,
and for that at that age, and even actually younger when he got in the team, to be played at left back or right back when you're actually a midfielder, and like then have to invert but still do the defensive work. Like there's a real trust to do that with a player that age. I'll throw another one, Diego Gomez. I mean, he burst on
doing the whole squad here.
no, but he remember he scored. He scored that. Those absolute stunners against Barnsley in the cup, and it was like, poof, and then he got a place in the team, and he's shown real promise too. So yeah, they've got, like, it all comes back to the same conversation too. This is like a structure. It's just the wheels keep turning. The head coach is one part of it, and like the fans might not have really taken to him the same way, but he has done a very good job.
Yeah, and leading the line, 35-year-old captain, leader, legend, Danny Welbeck. Got to be one of the most liked people in football history ever, isn't he? Can anyone think of anyone that, like, literally I can't think of anyone who doesn't like Danny Welbeck. In fact, if I met someone, I'd be like, you're weird, I'm never speaking to you ever again. Like John McGinn, Saka, like in terms of like universal.
No contest of the first one.
Yeah, but universally liked footballers
Milner.
by basically everyone. Yeah, maybe James Milner.
No,
but
Manchester United fans don't like. He's played for everyone that they hate, I think.
But his is like a longevity thing. Like I think with Welbeck, you genuinely watch him, and when he scores, you're like, God,
that guy,
buzzing for that guy.
11 years since he left United, and they're still applauding him off the pitch. Yeah. That's extraordinary. Like that doesn't happen very often.
No, absolutely chuffed for Danny Welbeck as well. And just before we wrap up part 1, kudos to the football finance expert Kieran Maguire for this tweet when he said, first Grimsby Town, then Brighton knocked Manchester United out of the domestic cups. Cantona was right. The Seagulls do indeed follow the Trawlers, which is definitely worth reading out on a podcast. Absolutely fantastic stuff. With some big wins this weekend, as I mentioned, Liam Rosenior getting off to a winning start with a 5-1 victory at Charlton. Arsenal continuing their impressive season with a 4-1 win at Portsmouth. And Manchester City 10-1 against Exeter on Saturday. And that is the quiz question to take us into the break. How many times has Pep Guardiola's side at City scored 5 goals or more in a game? Find out after the break. Welcome back to the Game Football Podcast from The Times and Sunday Times. I'm Tom Clark, and I've got Hamza Khalid-Lunat, Tom Allnutt and Gregor Robertson with me, and they were all stumped by the quiz question at the break. Couldn't believe it when I revealed the answer, which is how many times has Pep Guardiola's side scored 5 goals or more in a game? It's happened 66 times.
Wow.
Very good. That's because I asked them all to recreate their shock and awe in the break, and they completely fluffed it. But yeah, Pep City have scored 5 goals in a game 40 times. 40. They've scored 10 and 9 once. They've scored 8 twice, 7 5 times. They've scored 6 goals 17 times. Absolutely remarkable stuff.
Are you saying Exeter City, you're not special? Is that the
Exeter
message?
City, well done, lads. You got a goal back in the end. Like, I'm chuffed for them. But I think even Exeter City fans would not want me to talk about that game any more than I have done already. We were talking about managerial power plays in the first half of the show, and it's time for update 931 from our Tottenham Hotspur man in the studio, Tom Allnutt. Thomas Frank, where are we at? I've got Tottenham fans who are pals.
It's a different sigh, isn't it?
Yeah.
Instead of it's.
We've got lots of Tottenham fans who are listeners who regularly get in touch with me in different ways. Christopher, who's already been mentioned on the show previously, he said we showed some fighting spirit after the final whistle, just not during the 90 minutes of this game. He's regularly been saying Maresca's gone, Amarim's gone. Why aren't we doing the same? As I've mentioned some of our colleagues on the sports desk as well. Can't believe he's still there, but he is. And as we understand it, will still be there at least for this week, maybe? Who knows?
Yeah, I think this was a performance that wasn't a sackable performance.
Right.
Let's say that. I think losing at home to 2-1 to Villa, and they played pretty well in the second half. They actually started all right as well, but they played all right in the second half. There was kind of a spirited threat of a comeback, I guess you could say. Other positives, I thought Xavi Simons probably played his best game for Spurs so far. I thought he was really bright, looked really sharp. I personally think if Frank's got any chance, he needs Xavi Simons to kind of come to the table, because obviously of all the creative problems he's had.
As a number 10?
As a number 10, yeah. As a director, to be honest, he needs to be the kind of almost the main man in the Spurs team, which we haven't seen in these first few months. I thought Palhinha was good. I love the way Palhinha just goes around knocking people over. Sort of sledgehammer tackles, which aren't allowed anymore, but should be allowed, and they're just great fun to watch.
Here.
The Football League defender nodding next to us.
But overall, listen, Tottenham lost a game at home against a Villa team. They didn't rotate as much as they perhaps could have done, but they still had 2 or 3 key players not there. And in the first half, when they were 1 down and then 2 down, honestly, for 20, 30 minutes, it felt like end of days kind of stuff. It did, and
is that
I feel
is that about in the
I've seen
stadium?
lots of end of days.
I was going to say,
Spurs managers,
yeah.
so I have got a good radar for end of days kind of performances.
And when you say is it on the pitch or is it in the stands? Is it
Both.
the atmosphere? Is it vibes based, as you said in the first half of the show?
Both, yeah. The players, to me, for that 30 minutes, looked broken. I thought, I thought the way the team had no response to going 1-0 down. That was the big problem, and the fact that Villa just basically walked in a second goal, and you're almost kind of beyond that point where there's been red cards, there's been the fans kind of arguing with the players, there's been the players Instagramming the board, and it's all been kind of anger. I felt like when that second goal went in, you just saw fans filing out. It was almost like we just had enough. We're fed up with this, and I actually think the players looked like they had enough as well. The counterpoint to that, and it's important to say, is that the second half was much better. And whether the players were playing for Frank or playing in spite of Frank, who knows? We don't know that. But it was a response, and the fact that they got a goal back, they did actually score a second goal, but it was ruled out for offside. As I say, I don't think at the full-time whistle you thought that's the end, but I think it was a little step closer.
How has Thomas Frank seemed in recent weeks? Because you go to a lot of the press conferences, you speak to him before and after games. I was watching a clip of him on the TV the other day.
Old.
He's aged about
He is old.
5 years in these 6 months that he's been at Tottenham.
It's incredible.
Bags under the eyes,
Yeah.
looks a bit pale.
Looks very pale. He looks
Hasn't done enough yoga
deeply
recently.
unwell.
I agree with that.
It's like David Moyes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, his demeanour, in press conferences, he's still positive, and in a way, how can I say this? In a way that annoys Spurs fans, I think. Perhaps they're just looking to be annoyed at this point, you could say that. But I think, when he comes into presses after these matches, and he did in this one as well, and he sort of immediately looks at the positive. We played well in the second half, this happened, we can get behind this, the fans got behind us, that's great. I do think there's and I don't want to go back to Ange, because Ange had a lot of flaws, and we went on over them in a lot of detail. But there was one thing that I think Ange did well, is that he knew how to speak like the manager of a, let's say, an ambitious club. He would come into a press conference after that and know what the fans were thinking. He would say, we're out of the cup. That really annoys me. We haven't got any trophies now for the rest of the season. It's not acceptable to think this is okay. And then maybe like 5 minutes later, he'd say, we also attack well. Like Xavi Simons was better. But he knew that the thing to say
would get through to the
was
fans.
not to say in the first 2 or 3 sentences, we're building here, the defence is a bit better, by the way. And in a way, I sympathise with Frank, I do, because I think everything he says is logical. He's building layers in. He wants to work with the defence first. The squad is probably not quite as good as he thinks it is, and I really don't think it is. I think the Spurs squad is way off where they need to be in the top 4. There are loads of mitigating factors for Frank. But in his messaging and his projection to the players and the fans, I don't think he comes across like someone who thinks that this is all not okay. It's almost like this is acceptable. It's just a sort of step. And the massive fear I think that Spurs fans have had ever since the beginning when Frank was appointed was, are we just going to be a club now that accepts mediocrity, that we just accept being in the middle of the table, and it's sort of, we might go for a European place here and there. And I think that everything that kind of Frank says and his demeanour in that kind of way almost kind of confirms those fears.
He's a process coach, but you can't sound like, I totally agree, you can't sound like a process coach. You can't sort of, that can't be the message to the fans. Like, you need to be winning here and now. And he's come from a club that that same discussion again. Everything built around him was set up to succeed, and he had to coach the players and make incremental improvements, and he won't have the time to do that at Spurs, and part of that will be because of the optics and the support he gets from the crowd.
Every time we have Tom on, or I read a Spurs match report, it's like some sort of Cormac McCarthy novel. Like, just endless suffering everywhere.
Is that a compliment or is that?
I think so.
Yeah, but
Sound like a novelist. I think I'd take that part.
I'll take it.
In there, they've just got to soldier on like in the road with a trolley and all this stuff's happening around them. And every now and then they get a can of peaches. Like, yeah, we've got. But the key thing is, I think that they, like with Manchester United, you have to recognise that there has to be some sort of realignment and pain that comes with that, and you have to get through it. And if you do what United have done and chop and change very regularly, that keeps setting you back a bit. Now, I think they should be quite clear that the injuries. One thing I'm interested in actually is last season the injuries were an issue as well, and a lot of the blame was put with Postecoglou, but there's a similar issue with the injuries this season. So perhaps Ange had a bit of a point. Maybe he didn't. Maybe they're just quite unlucky. But I think they have to really support the manager properly, even if it gets really, really bad, and say we're going to stick with this project and see it through, and give him proper backing and funding, and wait for the players to get back. And when he's got the players back, then we'll judge him. Because I know Tom's looking at me,
smiling at me, going, "That's so naive."
How naive, but it sounds very like last year with Andrew. I mean, it's incredibly familiar. Where we were sort of saying, "Wait till they get the players back, and then we'll see."
You're all very educated people asking for logic. Logic doesn't work in football in 2026 as much as Johnny Northcroft wanted it.
The cannibals are here. They'll all release us.
But what, Tom, just some of those points that Hamza made there, is there a chance that could happen? Because we keep referencing some of the chopping and changing that's gone on at Manchester United and at Chelsea. Like
Paratici as well, moving on to Fiorentina.
Well, I mean, the thing is with Spurs, is the ownership are very behind Frank, right? And Vinay Venkatesham is also very behind Frank. And clearly Vinay has this experience at Arsenal where he's most informed by when he was at chief exec at Arsenal, and they went through this with Arteta and he came out the other side and everything was golden and rosy.
Arteta did win an FA Cup very early.
He did win an FA Cup, and also in his first 30 games, he won 17 games. Frank has won 11. And I think also you would probably say there were more signposts early on in the kind of Arteta period that you knew what they were trying to do. It was still very bumpy.
Arteta just very good. Arteta played in the COVID period as well. If there were fans there, I'm not sure he would have survived.
Very true.
That.
Good point.
Sorry.
Good point.
And I think, I mean, I wrote this in the piece before the weekend. That the kind of key metrics of Frank. Why do they bring him in the first place? If we're saying now they need to kind of bring in a whole new squad and make big new signings, then why didn't they appoint a manager who kind of would do that? The idea of Frank was very much that he was kind of being brought in to develop players. That they had good young players in this team, that he would make them better. How many players in the Spurs squad have got better under Thomas Frank in the last 6 months? It's hard to say. Richarlison maybe. Van der Ven's been fit, and that's about it really. They've sold Johnson, and Johnson was one of the players everyone kind of thought, well, this guy could really thrive under Frank. He's gone. First week of the window. What else was Frank brought in to do? Progressive style of football, they said. Haven't seen it. Honestly, haven't seen it. And the other thing was culture. He was meant to be a big kind of culture creator. And I understand, and I think, everyone understands these things take time. He's installed paddle courts at Hotspur Way. Great. Over time, these things are going to maybe make a difference. But in this first 6 months, the culture's got worse. Everyone is at each other's throats. The fans aren't happy. Nobody is happy. It's a very unhappy club. So I take the point that you give him time, and then there's a whole other debate about what do you do if you don't, what are the alternatives? Clearly with United and Chelsea, you're seeing that there's not an obvious thing mid-season, so maybe you just do because you do. But also, there has to be some reason why you give him time, and if you're thinking, well, why do we appoint him? Is he achieving those things we thought we would get from him? And if he isn't, then where's the evidence?
That's to return to the point we made earlier, though, as in, the manager's the only one under pressure here. There are lots of other people involved. Yeah. And if that manager feels the pressure is uniquely on them, they will act in a way that is short-termist. And what Spurs don't need right now is another person that will just fix a door while the ceiling is fallen in, right? You want someone that will address all of those issues properly, and he needs to feel like he has that support and feels comfortable. Otherwise, he'll start doing those sort of things, and then you're back to square one again.
A lot of sense being spoken on the Game podcast. Will we see some sensible decision making in modern football? Who knows? Tom Ulmott will keep you up to date, Tottenham fans, on the Times website. Let's move on to another manager who's been under pressure but got a much needed victory. Nuno Espirito Santo at West Ham. Gregor, you were there to see it. A West Ham win at home.
Unbelievable scenes. Yeah, 10 games without a win. I have to say there wasn't that much between West Ham and QPR. The team
come on, don't go too quick.
11th,
Don't go too
11th
quick.
in the Championship. All goes well for next season. No, the biggest bright spark was Tati Castellanos, the new striker, getting off the mark. It was a great header as well, like beautifully timed, and sort of it looked like if you put crosses in the box, he knows what he's doing. And he's got a bit of pedigree actually. I said in my report, it's not a signing that everyone went, oh, like, yeah, maybe he'll score a goal.
A lot of people went, who?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
He's got 2 caps for Argentina. He scored 14 goals for Lazio across Serie A and Europa League last season. Got into double figures for Girona in La Liga a couple of seasons before that. Played in the MLS before, so he's not a superstar, but he was actually bright in the game too. He had some decent efforts. He links play well. There was, even in the build-up for the first goal, both him and Pablo, who's the other sort of centre-forward who came on in this game, another new signing, they both used their bodies really well to sort of... Jared Bowen played a ball inside from the right flank, and they both kind of rolled a defender, which showed actually, and also, a big thing, question mark, when players arrive from whatever league, is, as I keep banging on about, is can they deal with the physicality?
Yeah.
I know it's a Championship team, but big centre halves, they rolled them, ball got moved out to Somerville, goal. Somerville was a bright spark, and he's
someone you've been saying for ages. If he can actually deliver on this promise that he showed,
it kind of blew my mind. He scores a goal, and you get on whatever website and you look when he scored his last goal. It was October 2024, and then you look for him. Oh no, that's his second goal. It's his second goal 18 months after moving for more than 25 million from Leeds, when he was the best player in the Championship. So it hasn't been a good return on the investment. He hasn't been selected a lot of the time, but I think he's been all right in the last few weeks, actually. He was decent against Forest. There were some moments where West Ham would turn over the ball in midfield, quite a few moments actually in the first half, and he would drive the team forward up the pitch. He's quick. He's like a driving force when he's at it, and getting a goal will be good for his confidence, and for Castellanos too. So and for West Ham, and for Nuno. He smiled afterwards. The first question was, must be nice to win. And he was like, it's really nice. It's like so nice. He just kept saying, really, really nice. Yeah, and had a big beaming smile, and you thought, oh, that's nice.
But you're quite right. You're quite rightly pointing out that it is against QPR, 11th in the Championship. We shouldn't get too carried away. But is there a bit of hope for West Ham here? Because they've not been on this show, and generally for the last couple of weeks, they've got Tottenham on Saturday, the big one.
El Crapico.
El Crapico, very good. Yeah,
El Sacico, whatever you want.
Anything you want to call it. And then they've got Sunderland at home, then Chelsea away, Burnley away. I mean, does anyone have hope for West Ham? So many people have written them off. Martin Samuel says they're already relegated. Anyone got some hope?
They need to sign defenders. I sound like a broken record. I realise that. Apologies, listeners, but it's true. They started by signing 2 forwards. Great. That was important. There's a lot of areas they could strengthen, but the biggest of all is defence. They've conceded 43 goals now. I think it's the worst in the league. Mavropanos went off with a neck injury, and he was a lot of treatment on the pitch. Went off on a stretcher. I don't think we'll see him for a wee while. You wouldn't hang your hat on him in the first place. Max Kilman came back in. No one wants to see him at West Ham in the team. That's really stark. They definitely need defenders. So if they sign a couple of centre halves, I actually think they've got enough going forward to score enough goals to stay up. But it's just they need to tighten up.
Especially when Nuno plays, right? I mean, they're not going to score and create their way out of trouble. It has to come from a solid base. You look at all his best teams. It's come from being well organised, hard to break down, and then they beat teams on the break. And if they haven't got that firm foundation, they've got no chance.
Yeah, good. Some big games coming up. Let's move on and talk about Fulham, Middlesbrough. Hamza, you were at this game. Fulham, one of the form teams in the Premier League, they're continuing that form in the FA Cup, and it was all down to Harry Wilson. He's got to be one of the form players in the league at the moment, hasn't he?
First of all, this was a wicked match. I
Oh,
really
that's so
enjoyed
nice.
it.
I love it when Hamza enjoys a game. I feel so satisfied.
Like I said, there's been a lot of rubbish matches I've watched this season. This was not one of them. It was a real joy, and it was a credit to English football, actually, the way that both teams attacked throughout the match. Middlesbrough were better in the first period. They built in a really sort of attacking way. That they used Hayden Hackney in a variety of different roles. They played through the right, had cutbacks, really nice moves. And because of that, they took a deserved lead. And Marco Silva's never been knocked out of the FA Cup in the third round. He's a good record, reached the quarterfinals twice in the past 3 years, and he was not going to let that record go. And on the 55th minute, he sends on Harry Wilson with Tom Kearney and Raul Jimenez. And Wilson is, at the moment, he's playing a different level of football, where he's attempting things that other players wouldn't ordinarily do, and it's coming off. I mean, like the first goal, he just cuts in, shoots, bang, goal, and it's just like, it's so easy for Harry Wilson.
It looks so certain, doesn't it? I thought that even in the Chelsea game, when they were playing against 10 men for a long time, but he just absolutely ran the show in that game against a lot of world class players. And
then he gets the ball, and you just see him. He's orchestrating play now. They're looking to him, and I was actually a bit concerned when Iwobi went to the Africa Cup of Nations that Fulham would struggle without him. And I thought, Wilson's playing well. I wasn't sure if he'd be able to do what Iwobi's doing, and he has, in addition to what he was already doing. So he's orchestrating play and then finishing it, and then you get the goal at the end, the 92nd minute or whatever, which is just a ridiculous flourish. The ball comes across to him, and he just sort of impudently sort of dinks it with the outside of his left foot to the back post for an easy tap in. You're like, this guy's playing out of this world football at the moment. He's playing brilliantly.
I was there 2-3 weeks ago when he scored that goal against Palace. You know, with
it
the
was a
outside
beautiful move.
I mean, real technical quality, honestly.
Yeah, he's 28. He's out of contract in the summer, as Marco Silva keeps pointing out in his press conferences as well. Another manager who's maybe thinking about his future and thinking, if you don't keep Harry Wilson, then I might not stay here much longer. I mean, as you referred to at the start, before we started recording, Gregor, there was talk about him potentially moving on from Fulham in the summer.
Yeah, he was close to
now he's going to be.
Apparently,
people are going to be looking at him surely for a move in the summer, aren't they?
Well, yeah. Suddenly the dynamic shifted. Yeah, he was like possibly someone they wanted to realise a bit of a return on their investment on in the summer, and now his form is just ridiculous. And yeah, the power is in his hands. He could run down his contract and see who'd take a punt on him. It's going to be a punt.
Has anyone seen anyone lately, like in the live games that you're going to, that, as Hamza said, you just buzz off by going, wow, this guy's in amazing form. He's got to be one of the form players in the league, hasn't he? Anyone seen anyone lately who can keep up with him?
We already mentioned him. I loved watching Kadioglu when I went in a couple of weeks ago. Just the way he carries the ball. He's such a great watch. He sort of socks low down and just keeps going and going. I mean, I love that guy. He's a fantastic left back.
Gregor, you've seen a lot of West Ham lately, so this is a tough question for you.
Yeah. No, there's a guy called John McGinn.
Oh, for God's sake! Right. Bleep that out. John McGinn's going to become a swear word.
No, I'm serious. I think he's been among the best players in the league this year.
No one thinks you're joking.
I'm serious.
No one thinks you're joking. No one thinks you're joking.
He was great again at the weekend, and yeah.
Tielemans was also excellent.
Tielemans has been brilliant.
If we don't want to talk about John McGinn, then Tielemans was...
Surely talk about Morgan Rogers as well, but anyway, yeah.
No, but he's right. I wrote a piece about Adam Morton not so long ago about the way he kind of progresses the ball through midfield, and he's someone who's really similar. Some of his passes against... I was at the Arsenal game in that first half. You get the ball deep and he's under pressure, and you just release Watkins or Rogers, like just a pass that you didn't see, and he's great at that. So he's really important for Aston Villa in the way they play.
Yeah, we mentioned a couple of teams, Tottenham and West Ham, that need signings. Are there any other clubs that you think we're in the middle of the transfer window now, being fairly quiet so far? Anyone that comes to mind that you think they need X, they need Y to improve their season, to get European football, to make sure that they're not getting relegated? Anyone coming to mind?
Liverpool might want a defender. I don't think they'll do it, but they probably could do with one, given that Bradley's out for the season now.
Yeah.
And Gomez is the only right back cover, so it might just mean...
It's so hard, though, for a team like Liverpool to get a player, because you don't want to, you can't just kind of... You need a kind of... You talked about the American model. You need almost a trading model, don't you, where can we just borrow him for like 6 months? That would be really ideal, and then we'll give you him instead and just swap for 6 months. That would be really nice, wouldn't it?
And you've also got one thing that people don't consider is that you've got like pathways as well. So like you don't want to buy a player having spent, for example, a number of months in the previous year working with another player and saying, we've got a vision for you. Yeah. We want you to play a lot. We think that you're going to do this, and they pick up an injury, and then you buy another play in the same position, then that player's going to feel that you negotiated with, that you've sort of you've misled them a bit. So it's not straightforward. And then you also want them to develop as well, because when they develop, that's better for the team. And let's say you're going to sell them, you get more value, or if you're going to keep them, that's even better for the team. So yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than people assume.
Yeah, Tom, anyone that springs to mind? Positions, players?
I mean,
teams?
Spurs need firepower, you know.
If they were to sign one like position, if they were only to spend, because so much with Tottenham has been about, not stop signing players that are kind of like 7 out of 10 squad players, potential. Spend a lot of money on one player. Who would you go? Where would you go?
Left wing, I think, is the position they need most. I mean, they haven't replaced Son, but even last couple of years, Son was sort of not quite what he was, and so they. Up front, they need something. I mean, they got Solanke, and that's another thing. I mean, he came off the bench against Villa, which is obviously really important. He came back for 10 minutes, and that's a big thing. And so you'd think if he's okay, then they maybe be all right, just about in terms of central kind of striker. But they need kind of a game-changing winger. I mean, that's what they haven't had for so long now. I think they tried with Eze, for example, even Gibbs White, that kind of number 10 position, but they could really do someone on the left. I mean, they were thinking about Savinho, weren't they? But now he's out injured for 2 months. I don't think they're going to go back there. So that's the challenge, I think, for them.
Yeah.
I think Newcastle really need to defend there. Martin Hardy wrote about that in the game today. Dan Burns out, Shar's out, Lascelles is out. I know Lascelles is a backup, but they're down to the bare bones, and they've got a ridiculous schedule. So I think we'll see Newcastle seeing a defender this month. Yeah, really interesting. Keep up to date with the latest transfer news on the Times website. Chaps, we'll leave it there. Hamza Khalik Lunat, Tom Allnut, Gregor Robertson, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for making it all the way through an episode talking about the FA Cup without mentioning the magic word. Well done indeed. Listeners, thank you very much for joining me. As always, we'll be back on Thursday. We'll see you then.